Imagine buying a piece of land twice the size of Texas for just 2 cents an acre. It sounds like the deal of a lifetime, but in 1867, when the United States did exactly that, most Americans thought it was a joke. They called it Seward's Folly, a frozen, worthless wasteland, a colossal waste of money. Today, we know Alaska is a treasure trove of natural resources, a strategic military outpost, and one of the most beautiful places on Earth. So what were the Russians thinking? Why would the Russian Empire sell a territory of nearly 600,000 square miles for just $7.2 million? This is a story of a terrified empire, a visionary politician, a secret bribery scandal, and a shocking disregard for the people who already called Alaska home. To understand why Russia sold Alaska, we have to look at a map from the 1850s. Russia was a sprawling empire, but it was also financially and militarily crippled. The main reason for the sale was the disastrous Crimean War. From 1853 to 1856, Russia fought a brutal war against an alliance of the Ottoman Empire, France, and most importantly, Great Britain. Russia lost, badly. The war left the empire bankrupt and its navy shattered. Russian officials looked east across the Bering Strait and saw a massive, undefendable territory. Their great rival, Great Britain, controlled Canada right next door. They worried that in the next war, Britain would simply march in and seize Alaska by force. They would lose the land and get nothing in return. The Tsar's own brother, Grand Duke Constantine, put it bluntly in an 1857 memo. He warned that the expansionist United States was bound to overrun the entire continent sooner or later. His advice was clear: Russia might as well get paid for Alaska before it was taken for free. Adding to this fear was a simple economic reality. The Alaskan colony was no longer profitable. Its entire economy was based on the fur trade, run by the Russian-American Company. But by the 1850s, the sea otters had been hunted to near extinction, and the profits had vanished. The colony, which never had more than a few hundred Russian settlers at any one time, was becoming a financial burden. Selling Alaska solved 2 problems at once. It would provide the empire with much-needed cash and deny a strategic prize to their British rivals. The only question was, who would they sell it to? They refused to even consider selling to Britain. That left one obvious customer: the United States. On the American side, the idea found a champion in Secretary of State William H. Seward. Seward was a firm believer in manifest destiny, the idea that the United States was destined to expand across the continent. He saw Alaska not as an icebox, but as a crucial gateway to Asia and a key to American power in the Pacific. He famously predicted that Alaska's forts would one day become the outposts of my own country. But most Americans didn't share his vision. The nation was exhausted and in debt from its own devastating civil war. The press relentlessly mocked the idea. Newspapers called it Wall Russia and joked that the U.S. was acquiring a polar bear garden. The purchase was deeply unpopular. This is where the story takes a turn, moving from grand strategy to secret backroom deals. The Russian ambassador to the U.S., a man named Baron Eduard de Stokel, had been cultivating relationships in Washington for years. In March 1867, he and Seward hammered out the entire treaty in a single, all-night negotiating session. For $7.2 million in gold, the deal was done. But getting the treaty through a skeptical Congress required more than just good arguments. This is where the deal gets dirty. Newly uncovered documents show that Baron de Stokel launched what was essentially Russia's first covert influence campaign in America. He secretly paid lobbyists, newspaper editors, and even members of Congress to support the purchase. A congressional investigation later revealed that about 10 congressmen, including the famous abolitionist Thaddeus Stevens, each received payments of around $10,000 to vote yes. When the U.S. finally paid Russia, around $140,000 of the money mysteriously disappeared, likely used to pay off these bribes. The purchase of Alaska wasn't just a land deal. It was a swindle, greased by Russian money. Even after all that, the deal was almost derailed when the House of Representatives, distracted by the impeachment trial of President Andrew Johnson, simply forgot to appropriate the money. For 10 long months, the Russians had to wait for their check. Lost in all this political maneuvering were the tens of thousands of people who already lived in Alaska. The Tlingit, the Aleut, the Yupik, and many other indigenous peoples were not consulted. Their land, their homes, and their futures were being sold by one foreign power to another. The text of the 1867 treaty is revealing. It granted U.S. citizenship to the few Russian colonists who chose to stay. But Article 3 of the treaty dismissed Alaska's native inhabitants as uncivilized tribes. They were not given citizenship or rights. They were simply handed over to be governed under U.S. Indian laws without their consent. For them, the Alaska Purchase was not a deal. It was a dispossession. For 30 years after the sale, it looked like the critics were right. Alaska was a remote, expensive territory that few Americans cared about. Then, in 1896, everything changed. Gold was discovered in the Klondike region. Suddenly, tens of thousands of prospectors flooded into Alaska hoping to strike it rich. The land that had been called a folly was now producing immense wealth. The narrative completely flipped. Decades later, another discovery transformed Alaska's fortunes: oil. The massive oil strike at Prudhoe Bay in 1968 and the construction of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline turned the state into an economic powerhouse. Seward's gamble had paid off 1,000 times over. What was once mocked as Seward's folly was now hailed as one of the greatest real estate deals in history. Even today, the sale of Alaska echoes in modern geopolitics. Some Russian nationalists call it a historic blunder and periodically dream of getting it back. In 2024, a viral rumor claimed Vladimir Putin had declared the sale illegal. Fact-checkers quickly debunked it, and the U.S. State Department wryly commented that he was not getting it back. But the myth persists, because the story of the Alaska Purchase is so incredible. It was a complex convergence of factors: a Russian empire acting out of fear and desperation, an American statesman with a bold, long-term vision, and a secret campaign of bribery that pushed the deal over the finish line. Ultimately, Russia sold Alaska because it believed it was better to get some money for a territory it couldn't defend rather than lose it for nothing. And the United States bought it thanks to a few stubborn believers and a pile of secret Russian cash, in a gamble that would change the map of the world forever.